These are the most common stretches that you will come across whenever you Google stretches for back pain. But they're wrong. Well, not wrong, but grossly incomplete. Hi guys, Tom Morrison here, and in this video we are going to cover the 5 most common stretches that you will see for lower back pain and why you end up running around in circles and feeling like you're not getting anywhere, or maybe feeling okay for a few days and then everything feels like it's just reset all over again on you. We're going to cover the most common things that are missed when it comes to directions of your hips and your spine, and we're also going to cover the few simple exercises that you need to add in order to rid yourself of having recurring back pain issues. Lower back pain is usually caused by either dysfunction above or below where you're actually feeling the pain. So it could actually be a restriction in how your upper back moves, or lack of flexibility or weakness with your hips. If you have those few things on point, then even if you're someone like myself that has a disc injury, you could be totally fine. So everything that we're going to cover in this video today, make sure to pay attention to the bigger picture so that you're making sure that you attack everything from all angles. First, we're going to focus on the hips, as they have the biggest influence on how everything can feel. If your supporting structures of your lower back move really well and feel strong and stable, then the lower back can actually look after itself. With the hips, you need to be able to flex at the hip, you need to be able to extend at the hip without arching the lower back, and you also need to be able to internally rotate and externally rotate on both sides, and you also need to have a good level of strength for resistance whenever you're abducting and whenever you're adducting. So Jenny should have good level of strength there to resist anything pulling her knee out of position in there. So that is your hip movements. You don't need to be able to do the splits, that is advanced flexibility. As long as you have a well-rounded level of strength and control in all of the ranges that we just covered there, you can have a totally healthy lower back. Now, let's look at the movement directions of the most common stretches. With the pigeon stretch, you have external rotation on the front leg and extension on the back leg. And as well, for a lot of people, this can be quite painful on the knee if they're limited with those things, so it can actually be quite intense. If Jenny then falls over into the figure 4 stretch, keeps in the same leg, you'll essentially see we have external rotation and a little bit of flexion on that side. So we have only actually addressed 3 of the overall hip movements. But what about the other 3 exercises? Cat-cow, child's pose, and cobra pose. They're more directed at how the spine itself actually moves. So let's take a look at the movement directions of the spine. With the spine, we have forwards flexion, a sad Jenny. With the spine, we also have backwards extension, a happy Jenny. And we also have lateral flexion extension. So whenever Jenny's here, this is extension, that is your flexion on that side. Whenever she flops over, then it's going to be flexion on this side, extension on the other side. And we also have rotation as well. And everything in between. There's discs in between each vertebra, which give you the ability to do whatever Jenny's doing. I don't know what she's doing, but that is all of your movements of the spine. So with the cat-cow, we have our forwards, flexion and extension. With the child's pose, we have forward flexion, and we've got deep hip flexion going on there. And with the cobra pose, if Jenny goes into that for me, then we have our extension of the hips, and we have our spinal extension as well. So pretty much everything there, if Jenny goes through the 3 of them again, is forwards and backwards, nothing lateral, no rotation whatsoever. So hopefully now you can see just how incomplete these stretches are whenever it comes to managing your lower back pain. You're missing out on so many directions that imagine if I was trying to fix elbow pain and I wasn't allowed to ever bend my elbow. You're completely missing out on certain functions of how those joints move. The most common stretches will probably only ever give you temporary relief until you address your entire hip and spine movement. Happily, it's easy to introduce simple movements so that you can cover all of the other directions. First, we have our 90-90 position. So what Jenny's done is she has her front leg in her external hip rotation. She has the back leg in internal hip rotation, and she's testing each side as she turns her body. That basically tests your internal rotation and then your external rotation. So if you can hold yourself up in that position and move the arms, your hips are moving quite well. Make sure you test both sides. So if Jenny swaps over quickly, if Jenny was to do this on the other side and could barely take her hands off the floor, or say she was able to hold herself up and point her hands forwards, then her external rotation would be okay on that side. But as soon as she was to start turning the body and she was to fall down, the internal rotation on the back leg, so on her right leg here, would be the one she really wants to work on, okay? So getting into this position, testing that first of all to see if the range of motion is there, because if it's really bad on one side and the other, you're probably going to find you're going to have back pain on one side. So going back to the first side, what you can do to start to improve this position is, as Jenny's done, put your hands down and just move yourself around. Let your hands assist you. Some people, when I first teach them this, they actually need to have their elbow on the floor. They're that stiff and tight, sore. So you hang out there and then gradually start to work until you can straighten the arm, and then sit yourself up a bit, get the hand closer, and then eventually hands off, and then you can move yourself around. So that is your 90-90 position. So it's going to address the external rotation, internal rotation, and also your hip extension on that back leg as well, but a flexion on the front leg. After you have worked on your hip rotation, you then want to go into some abductor and adductor strength, okay? So actually activating these muscles and making them work. So you stay in your 90-90 position, you just fall over to the side a little bit. What Jenny's done is she's lifted herself up and she's trying to support herself when she's on the front leg here. It's externally rotated. She's working on her abduction, and then when she puts the knee down on the back leg, she holds herself up, lifts the front leg. That works on her adductor strength. So that really starts to hit the hips from all angles and starts to build strength in that, which makes your hips feel crazy, crazy strong. So this is a really, really good exercise to do. Just 10 marches, basically, lifting up the leg one at a time. So you just shift your weight. You'll notice Jenny sort of rocking back and forward a little bit. You're also sneakily getting some happy lateral core strength going on here as well. So it's another really key thing to think about when it comes to back pain. You want to make sure that your core can work at the same time as your hips. So again, when you're on the front leg, your abduction is working. When you're on the back leg, your adduction is working. So how are we going to add in some more of the spinal movement? I hear you scream in silence. Well, we're going to put the elbow down, stay in our 90-90 position, so we're getting tons of time there. And what Jenny's going to do is reach her hand past her hand and then rotate up to the sky and take a deep breath in and breathe out and try to go a little bit further. So it's going to work on her upper back. Her hips are kind of locked in place because of they're in the 90-90 position. She can push the leg back a little bit in this back bit, squeeze the bum, so you're working on that hip extension. 5 deep breaths like this you're going to do, and you're going to do that on both sides. Make sure you do both sides. And as well, if you're doing one side and you're rotating around, you're like, whoa, and it feels really sticky, then you want to spend a bit more time on that side. These are little things that can just happen because of your daily habits. So that's your thoracic rotation. So we've worked on our flexion, we've worked on our external rotation, our internal rotation, our abductor strength, our adductor strength, our thoracic rotation. We need some lateral flexion as well. So what Jenny's going to do is she's going to lean onto that side. She's going to lean the arm over herself, and she's going to then extend everything here on this side. So this is her lateral flexion. So she lets her own arm basically stretch her out, and she hangs in that position and she lifts her hips up a little bit. Again, take a deep breath in that position and just let everything hang out. And she just swaps around to the other side again. Same thing. So you're lifting the hips up and just getting that nice stretch along the side. Take your time whenever you're doing these movements, but this is how you're going to start to tie everything in together. So you're making sure you're getting your rotation as well and your lateral flexion and extension whenever you're going through all your spine movements. And then you can bring back in your cat and your cow and your camel and everything like that as well. This is what's going to start to tie in all of those movement principles together. Other things to consider with recurring lower back pain is how good is your balance, how strong are your hips also, and how your spine to hip awareness is. So do you understand how to load your hips rather than moving through the spine? Do you know how to actually engage your hamstrings and glutes? So this is all stuff that's covered inside the Simplistic Mobility Method movements. So I would highly recommend to go over and check that out if you want to get out of this recurring cycle.